Hi, welcome back to my video. Now, if you're my student, we're going to go through the UNIS Primary School Science paper, Practice 1 with you today. Now, and then you get your pen, your green pen and a paper ready, and you're going to work through the corrections. Take down not just the answers, but also the annotations. Now, if you are not my student and you're watching this for the first time, welcome. Just enjoy the lesson and take it as your revision or something that you find useful. Let's get started. Now this first question is a revision of your water cycle question. Now Sam created the model of the water cycle as shown below. He counted the number of water droplets forming on the underside of the plastic cover, underline this. So underside refers to this. So you need to understand not just the words, but also the diagram here. So this is a plastic cover they're talking about, and the underside will be here. So there were water droplets that form on the underside. So please draw this in. Now, what kind of circumstance will allow for condensation on the underside? That is possible if this is hot water. If this is hot water, let's say at 60 degrees Celsius, and if this is in a room, let's say at 30 degrees Celsius, then the cooler surface will be this plastic cover. As you know, condensation happens on the cooler surface. Alright, the idea of cooler surface allows for the heat loss by the water vapor. So heat loss by water vapor on the cooler surface. What will happen if water vapor loses heat on the cooler surface? It will change state from gas to liquid. So if you're my student, please make sure you're writing this down. So on the cooler surface, what happens? Heat loss, sorry, I wrote this wrongly. Heat loss by water vapor on the cooler surface will result in a change in state from gas to liquid. And this is what we call condensation. Condensation. So how can we have more water droplets form in 1 minute? In other words, they're asking how can we increase the rate of condensation? How can we increase the rate of condensation? Well, there are two ways. First thing, if we can increase the temperature difference between the cooler surface and the hot water, that will work. How can we increase the temperature difference? Make this plastic cover even cooler. For example, adding ice cube on top of the plastic cover. If you put ice cube on top of the plastic cover will become even colder. Then there will be greater rate of condensation on the plastic cover. So C must be one of the answers. So that will leave only 2 and 4. Now, the other way to increase the rate of condensation is if you have a lot more water vapor in the first place. How can we increase the amount of water vapor? Well, if you make the water even hotter, then what happens is that there will be a greater rate of evaporation. The greater rate of evaporation will result in a greater amount of water vapor that will naturally increase the rate of condensation. So adding boiling water definitely works. So we need to have B as the answer as well. So answer is 4. Now A doesn't work. If you put ice inside the beaker of water, you will start to cool the water. That will reduce the rate of evaporation, which will reduce the amount of water vapor inside the container and will reduce the rate of condensation. Let's go to question 2 now. The diagram shows the boiling and melting points of 3 different substances, J, K, and L. Now, if you're not my student, I would always advise you to pause the video first, try it inside your head on a piece of paper, and then play the video. If you're my student and watching this for the second or third time as your revision, please also do the same thing. Pause the video, try to understand the question first before playing it to just hear the explanation. Let's continue. The table here, table refers to this thing with many columns and rows. Show the boiling and melting points of 3 different substances J, K, and L. Now, this is a topic that you have in your lower block called the matter. And you learn that matter has 3 states: solid, liquid, and gas. And know that at different temperatures, like at the boiling point, the change in state will be from liquid to gas. At the freezing or melting point at the same temperature, a solid can change to a liquid, or a liquid can change to a solid. So which of the following state is represented by X, Y, and Z? So you are saying that, okay, for substance Y, it will boil at 18 degrees Celsius, which means that J here, substance J, it will be a solid under 2 degrees Celsius. Once it hits 2 degrees Celsius, it will melt, and then it becomes a liquid. And you keep increasing the temperature will keep rising until it becomes 18 degrees Celsius. Then it becomes a gas when it starts to boil. Of course, during this temperature range, it can also evaporate and become a gas as well. But here definitely it starts to boil and becomes a gas. So at 35 degrees Celsius, what state would substance Y be? 35 is clearly above 18 degrees Celsius. 35 is above the boiling point. Therefore, at 35, X will be a gas. Now, at 35, that's below the melting point of K. Remember, melting point is the point where a solid becomes a liquid, and melting point is the same as freezing point, exact same temperature. So it means that substance K will freeze at 45 degrees Celsius, and any temperature below it will be a solid. So at 35 degrees Celsius, substance K is in the solid state. Finally, for substance L, 35 degrees is between 15 and 16. Remember, between the melting point and boiling point is a liquid. So substance L is a liquid at 35 degrees Celsius. So Z is represented by a liquid. Okay, we got the answer. K is by so state Y is a solid and state X is gas. So answer is 3 for this. In this question, we're revising again something about water cycle, about condensation. Now, Anissa brought 4 beakers of water, A, B, C, and D, of different temperatures into her living room. The temperatures of the 4 different beakers are plotted on the bar chart below. Now, room temperature is roughly 30 degrees Celsius. Now, it may not be 30, but I've just used a random average number that is quite likely to be possible to be a classroom temperature. Now, some of those are below 30 degrees Celsius. This could be maybe 5 degrees Celsius. This could be maybe 4 degrees Celsius. It is above, so it could be maybe 40 degrees Celsius. This could be 50 degrees Celsius. Are these the exact numbers? No. I'm just putting this number down here for me and for you to better visualize and picture it in your head. In other words, if there's water inside this beaker and the temperature of the water is at 5 degrees Celsius, that tells you clearly if there's a beaker here with water at 5 degrees Celsius, then you will have lots of cooler surface here. Water droplets will form here. Same thing for this. At 4 degrees Celsius, water droplets will form on the cooler surface of the beaker. Now for substance C, if this water is at 40 degrees Celsius, then the cooler surface will be above here, on the inside of the beaker. Same thing for this. If this is at 50 degrees Celsius, water droplets will be forming up here. The cooler surface will be the inner surface here of the beaker. So on which 2 beakers would Anissa see water droplets forming on the outer surface? Definitely not these 2, because these are forming on the inner surfaces. It will be these 2 on the outer surfaces. Answer is A and B. Next question. 4. Pause first if you need to read the question and try it. Okay, let's continue. 2 identical wet towels, E and F, were hung outside a house to dry. So this question is testing on the knowledge of underwater cycle under evaporation and talking about rate of evaporation. The graph shows the mass of the water towers as they dry up. Now the three factors that you need to know that regarding rate of evaporation is WET. W representing the warmth, or you can talk about the temperature of the surroundings. The higher the temperature of the surrounding, the greater the rate of evaporation. E stands for the exposed surface area. You would have done an experiment like folding a towel into half, folding it some more into quarters. Alright, the more you fold, the smaller it becomes, the less exposed surface area it has. The less exposed surface area it has, the lower the rate of evaporation. That's why when your parents dry clothes, right after washing it, they spread out the towels, the shirt, the dresses. It increases the exposed surface area, so there's a greater rate of evaporation. Alright. Okay, I think I made a mistake here. So here, temperature should be here. T for temperature of the surrounding. W is for wind. Okay. For those who spotted this earlier, good job here. So W represents wind. The greater the amount of wind in the environment, the greater the rate of evaporation. The greater the amount of wind, the greater the rate of evaporation. So you have written this because you were writing diligently. My apologies. Okay. So WET is a good way to remember: wind, exposed surface area, and temperature. Now they were hung outside a house to dry. That tells you there should be wind, and both will receive the same amount of wind. If they were outside the house to dry and it's under the sun, both will be in the environment where the temperature is the same, whether it's warm or the temperature is high or not. So what could be different if the wind condition is the same because they were all outside the house? If the temperature is the same, what could be different? So here where I look at the options here. So when they were outside, they may not be in the same environmental condition. For example, if one is in the shade and the one is in the sun, they're both outside, but one receiving less heat from the sun because it's shaded, of course, will be different. So this may change. Alright, nothing about folding them. So the exposed surface area here is the same. So here I think what they're trying to vary is the temperature that these towels are under. Obviously, the temperature must be different. That's why this towel dry faster than this. How do I know? Because at first they were both wet. Therefore, the mass of the wet towels at first were at 30 grams. After 30 minutes, the mass of towel F has dropped to 15 grams. Which means what happened to the other 15 grams at first? It had evaporated as water vapor. Towel E, however, was at 25 grams. Was there any evaporation of the water? Yes, there was some evaporation, but not as much as towel F. So towel F must have been in a place that is much hotter. I think F was in the sun and E was in the shade. Therefore, they have different temperature in their surrounding. Answer is 3 for this. Okay, this one is quite tricky, so I'll give you a while to study this diagram. And then, if I'm too fast, just pause the video. And then I'll go on to the options here. Okay, let's start. So Caitlin now conducted an experiment below. She filled cup A filled with some ice cubes and cup B with some water, and they both are the same. This is a very interesting question as it combines two concepts together. One is the idea of matter occupying space. The other one is about evaporation and condensate. So it's about condensation. So you notice at first, the cups here were identical cups, and they see cups are of the same mass. That's why you see the same reading. And both contains different water in different state. This is water at room temperature, liquid. This is ice cube, which is solid water, right? And they were at the same mass at first. After a while, 15 minutes, strangely, the reading of the weighing scale increased for cup A. But there was no change in nobody talked about adding water in here. But now there's water. There were 6 ice cubes here at first. That has dropped to just 3 ice cubes, which means some of the ice melted, but they all stayed inside the cup. What else do you observe? I hope you managed to be very observant and observe that there were some droplets outside here. Droplets that were not here at first, which means there was some condensation that happened. And this condensation these little water droplets here, all came from the water vapor that was in the surrounding air. So right now, this extra 5 grams is actually from these water droplets that have condensed on this side of the cup A. Whereas cup B remains unchanged, there's no difference, there's no cooler surface whatsoever, so the mass here remains the same. So what best explains the reason? So here would be cup A became heavier after 15 minutes as water vapor condensed into water droplets around cup A. 4 is the answer. To answer a question like this, you need to be able to look at the diagram very carefully. So don't rush through answering your questions. Answer the question, understand the pictures inside. All these details are given to you to give you clues to understand it. Your job is to understand it. Okay? Next one, question 6. Which of the following statement about fertilization is correct? This is about what you learn in P5 under human and plant reproduction. And this one is purely for human reproduction. Now, fertilization is the fusion of the male and the female reproductive cell. Sometimes they call it the male and the female sex cells. For the human, the male sex cells will be the sperm, and the female one will be the egg cell. Egg cell is found in the ovary. Now, fertilization happens, alright, you only need 1 sperm to fertilize 1 egg. So that is definitely correct. This is wrong because 2 eggs means 2 female eggs, reproductive cell. They can't be combining. You need to have male and female reproductive cell combining, fusing together. Fertilization only takes place in the female body, not the male body. Fertilized egg grows in the womb, not in the stomach. Question 7. The following shows the sexual reproduction of animals and flowering plants. So which of the following correctly identifies A, B, and X? So let's take a look. The animal reproductive cell is called the egg. The male reproductive cell will be called the sperm. So for B here, alright, will be either 1, 2, or 3. Now the process where female reproductive cell fuses with the male reproductive cell, that is called fertilization. And that will be option either 1 or 3. So option 2 is already struck out. Option 4, of course, is already out. Now you're left with 1 or 2. Let's go to A. Flowering plant. What's the name of the female reproductive cell? It's actually not the ovary. The ovary contains the ovules. And the ovules, inside the ovule is where you find the female reproductive cell. And the ovule is also known as the egg cell. Okay, so the answer is 1. Some of you got tricked and you thought that it's an ovary and you wrote down 3 as your answer. Okay. Next question, question 8. Luke draws a simple diagram as shown below to show his friends where 2 types of plants are growing near his house. O and X represent the 2 different types of plants. Now very clearly, O, right, is all along the seaside. They are nowhere inland, near to the sea. So very clear, this plant O is dispersed by water. Asking for the likely methods of dispersal of fruits or seed. O is by water. That's the answer. But that's to be double confirm. That's to be very sure. Sorry for the Singlish. Double confirm in Singlish. Plant X here is by animal. Now animal dispersal pattern is all over the place in a random way. So that's all over the place. And doesn't care whether wind direction is here or not, it's just all over the place. So answer is 1. Question 9. Serene wanted to find out if the number of wings of the fruits of plant or fruit R affects the amount of time taken for it to float in the air, stay afloat. So here this is the number of wings of fruit are. This is the variable that you must change. This is the change variable. You're testing this. So therefore, this must not remain the same. Okay? That's why she did this. She removed one wing of fruit R each time during the experiment. At first, she did it with 5 wings. Then she repeated the experiment with 4 wings by removing one. Then she repeated again by removing another wing, left 3. And she kept doing it. And then she recorded the time taken for it to stay afloat in the air. So what must she keep the same? If you keep the same, of course she cannot be removing the wings, right? So this one, of course, she cannot keep the same. So any answer in A must be wrong. So 1 and 2 must be wrong because A is there. Now, of course, you must keep the height at which the fruit was dropped the same. So that you can, when you time it, it's from the same height that you drop it from. So B must be correct. Okay, we have both. B is confirmed here. So right now, I just need to check C and D. Time taken for it to stay in the air, this cannot stay the same. This is your measured variable. If this is the same, then there's no point in the experiment, right? Because experiment is to find out if it affects the amount of time taken. This amount of time is what you're going to measure. That's why it's called the measured variable. Time taken to stay afloat will not be the same. You can't control it. That's the result. So C cannot stay the same. This is wrong. This must stay the same. Whether it's a windy environment or not windy, you must conduct it in the same environment, preferably in a place where there's no wind. Alright, so answer is 4 for question 9. Question 10. Derek set up the following experiment using green bean seeds. Now this experiment we tried in class, but it didn't work out because all our germinating seeds start to turn moldy. Unfortunately, so let's try to do this again after the exams. Now, which of the following conditions should he choose in order to have the thinnest seedlings at the end of the experiment? Now, we talk about this, right? Thinnest seedling stock means that they are actually very unhealthy. For example, let's say there are 2 trays right now. Alright, and we put in some cotton wool inside these 2 trays. And then we put different amount of seeds. Here, I put in 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds. Here, I put in many seeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, lots of seeds. So the overcrowding clearly is in this container. There's overcrowding here. During overcrowding, the germinating seed will be competing for 3 things. LMW. L stands for competing for light, for minerals, for water. Now, germinating seeds do not need light. They just need they need warmth, oxygen, and water. So this is for the growing plants. Okay, but for germination it's different. For germination, what you require will be warm, oxygen, and water. So different kind of condition. This is for the growing seeds once they start to have leaves. Okay, so for example, we're talking about thinness. So I'm going to postulate this one here. Alright, all this will be very thin and skinny. Why? Because they start to have leaves. And once they have leaves, the leaves need to trap sunlight to make its own food. But because they are so close together, right? The leaves from one seedling will be blocking that of the other seedling, not covering it. So how do I then overcome this? This one will need to grow taller to overcome it. That's why they're all trying to outgrow each other in terms of height in order to be on top of each other's leaves. Whereas in this case here, it can just grow at its own pace, because the leaves that grow will not be covering the leaves of the neighboring plants easily. So typically when you see tall and thin seedlings, it's unhealthy. It's a sign of overcrowding. But you see your 6 stems, this is a sign that they have time to grow properly. They don't need to compete for light, mineral, and water. That's why they look healthier. Remember, for this my students, I give example of Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson is very muscular, right? He has very thick arms, so very strong. Of course, muscles doesn't equate healthy, but this is a simple, straightforward example. But compared to a very skinny person like Mr. Bean, right? Beans. And he's kind of skinny. So comparing Mr. Bean and Mr. Dwayne Johnson, Mr. Dwayne Johnson will appear to be more healthy because he has thicker stems, okay? So which of the following conditions should he choose to have the thinnest seedlings at the end of his experiment? Thinnest one. So they must be in a place where there are lots of beans growing. Alright, and they're seedlings, right? And they must have moisture to grow. Answer is 4. Now, if you choose 1, you made a mistake because 1 there's no water. If there's no water, the seeds can't even germinate. Of course, you will not have any seedlings at all. Next one is on cells, or P5 lessons on cells. Which of the following are found in all 3 types of cells? This will be animal cell. See, no cell wall. This is plant cell in the leaves because you see chloroplast. This will be plant cell in the roots because there are cell wall here, so it's a plant cell, but I don't see any chloroplast inside. But no matter what kind of cell, they will only have these 3 things. All have nucleus. The thick black thing is the nucleus. This one, the nucleus. They have cytoplasm. This one, the jelly-like stuff inside is a cytoplasm. And there's cell membrane. This is the cell membrane. Cell membrane, cell membrane. So answer is 4. It's a very straightforward recall question. Last MCQ question. Now for those students in my class, I didn't mark this question because you couldn't do this. Why I couldn't do this? Because the labeling somehow was mislabeled. It went out of alignment. So it's not fair to you if I mark you wrongly. Okay? So let's skip this question in terms of your answering part. But to help you understand this, the answer for this, right? Which part of the cell enables T to enter the cell? The answer for this will be your cell membrane. The cell membrane is the one that controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. And cell membrane is this. This one is the cell membrane. This one is the cell wall. Alright? So I think based on the labeling here, I think X should be the 1. X should be the 1. If I were to shift everything to this side. I'm just guessing, but I think the answer here should be 2. But again, it's not fair to you, so I didn't count this in your marks. Let's go to the final 3 open-ended question hanging there. Ethan wanted to investigate the conditions, the factors affecting the rate of evaporation. Remember, WET for wind, exposed surface area, and the temperature of the surroundings. The teacher gave me 3 pieces of information here for different beakers, and there are different things here. To conduct a fair test, which 2 beakers should he use to find out if the surrounding temperature affects the rate of evaporation? So if I want temperature to be changed, then these 2 should be the same. So let's look which of the 2 will be the same. So I want wind and exposed surface area to be the same. Exposed surface area and we know wind, not volume also must be the same. So wind, exposed surface area, same. Now temperature must be different. These 2 are different. A wall of water is the same as well. So of course the answer is J and L. Alright, J and L. Because the temperature is different, we're testing if the surrounding temperature affects rate of evaporation. Surface area must be kept the same. Amount of water, of course, will keep it the same. So compare the change in the volume of water in each beaker identified in A. So A, I have my J and my L here because that's my answer here. No matter which container, all the water will decrease in volume because there will always be this rate of evaporation happening. Okay? Evaporation happens at any temperature. That's what you learn in your textbook. Evaporation happens at any temperature. In another experiment, Ethan used beakers J and K. At the end of the experiment, he observed there were more water in K than in J. Let's look at K and J. K and J, more water in K and J. Now, what is the same? This is the same here. This is the same here. This is the only difference. So that is what he was trying to investigate. So in this question, what's the aim? Is to find out if the exposed surface area affects the rate of evaporation. This will be the aim, to find out if the exposed surface area affects the rate of evaporation. How do you get to this answer? By comparing J and K, and this is the only difference. You look out for the difference. We're looking for aim of experiment. And difference here is about exposed surface area. Now let's go on to the second last question. The flower of X is shown here. Based on the diagram above, complete the table by identifying the parts. So here's how you are careless. C points to the whole thing, whereas D points to the black thing in the center here. So D will definitely be the ovule. The ovule becomes the seeds, and C is the ovary. Ovary becomes the fruit. It will swell and becomes the fruit. The diagram below shows two fruits, P and Q. Explain your answer based on the diagram above. Which fruit comes from plant X? Plant X is this. So this question must combine both this part B and the part on top. Alright, without looking at this part on top, you can't solve it. So this one has many ovules. Many ovules becomes many seeds upon fertilization. Okay, many ovules becomes many seeds. So which fruit comes from plant X? I will now give my claim. My claim is fruit P comes from plant X. Now this will be correct, but 0 mark because it's only a claim. No marks if you just stop here at P. You get marks if you give some evidence. How do I determine it is fruit P? Because I saw that fruit P has many seeds, while Q only has one. I need to make a comparison between the two. Now, the first in my class, I was quite lenient when I mark your work. I still give you your mark if you don't write this part. But by right, you should mention both because you're observing both. Okay, but this will only give you half a mark because you only give the evidence. You tell me what you have observed, which is fantastic. You observed that this has many seeds and came from many ovules. But I need to state it. So what if you have many seeds? So now is your reason. Okay, so fruit P is your claim. Fruit P comes from plant X. How do you know? P has many seeds while Q only has one. And the many seeds came from the many fertilized ovules of fruit P. So let's understand this better. Fruit P is a claim. The evidence comes from what you observe from the pictures. P has many seeds while Q only has one. And the reason is the many seeds came from the many fertilized ovules of fruit P. Let's go to the last question now. This is not the last question, it's still part of the same question. The diagram shows 3 flowers, okay, X, Y, and Z with some parts removed. Which part of the flower will develop into a fruit? Now remember, fruit comes from the ovary. So there must be the ovary. Y has no more ovary, so Y cannot be the answer. There's still an ovary here. There's still an ovary here. So definitely it must be X and Z. Okay, and that's your claim. Your claim is X and Z. Now, which of the following will become fruit X and Z? Again, claim is 0 mark. Now for the evidence. And the evidence that you have here is both of them still have their ovary. And what's the purpose of the ovary? Ovary to become fruit. But for the ovary to become a fruit, there must be fertilization. And for fertilization to happen, there must be stigma and the style. So, both of us say the ovary to become fruit. I talk about the parts they have. I talk about the function of it. So what's the purpose of the ovary? Is to become the fruit. They say the ovary to become fruit, stigma to receive pollen grains, and style for pollen tube to grow. So all these three parts must be present. Even you have the ovary, but if I cut off at the style, right, and there is no pollination that is possible, then fertilization will not be possible either. So to answer this, all three parts must be there to get your full marks. Okay, they must have the ovary to become a fruit, 1 mark here, and for the other two, half mark for mentioning there must be the stigma to receive pollen grains, and half mark for having the style for the pollen tube to grow. All three parts must be there. Next, let's go on to this. Now, Lily planted a papaya tree in her garden as shown below. However, it did not bear any fruits, even though there were flowers. There were flowers, so it is a flowering plant. Later on, she found out that each papaya tree can only bear flowers with only one kind of gender. Either there's a papaya tree with all male parts. Male parts meaning the anther and the filament, or the flowers will only have female parts, meaning they only have stigma, style, ovary, ovule. So why is it that the tree in Lily's garden could not bear fruits? Because firstly, there's only one tree, a tree. And the tree only had male papaya flowers. So if there's no female papaya flowers, then there is no pollination that is possible. There's no fertilization that is possible. Of course, there's no fruits. So why, if the papaya could not bear flowers, it only had male parts. So what if it only have male parts? And this one, right, you actually by right should not get any marks because it's given to you, right? They only have male parts. You only have male parts. So pollination and fertilization cannot happen. So no fruits can be born. He only had male parts, so pollination and fertilization cannot happen, so no fruits can be born. Okay? Or no fruits can happen. So you have your 1 mark here. Last question. This is a very straightforward cells question. So if you've gotten this one wrong, it means that you have not memorized or commit to memory the parts and function of cells. So if you are in my class this year, 2022, please remember you have already learned all this from Mr. Yap. And I revise this with you when you are in my class. So please make sure you memorize this. It's like memorizing your name, right? It's very funny if you tell people you forgot your name. So don't forget the parts of this. Now clearly all these are plant cells because you can see cell wall. And here I'm going to color all these parts in green. And this will be the chloroplast that contains the chlorophyll. So in other words, all these plant cells can make food because they can trap light to make food. So most likely they are found in the leaves of the plant. Okay. So they are plant cells. Definitely it's true. You can tell because this is the cell wall. Only plant cells have cell wall. They are found in the leaves. It's true because you already saw that there are, what's this? chloroplast. And if you're my student and you don't remember to do this, please remember to write down all this as part of your annotation. Z is a flowering plant. I can't tell it's a flowering plant. I can't tell it's a non-flowering plant because all plants can make food. So I can't tell. So this one is not possible to tell. It may be true. It may be false. Right? I can't tell. P contains chlorophyll, which is needed for plant to make food there. P contains chlorophyll. That is true. Q provides support to the plant. Q is the cell membrane. This is a cell membrane. Cell membrane controls the movement of substances in and out. Cell membrane is not the cell wall. So cell membrane does not support the cell. This is false. Lastly, R controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. R is the nucleus here. Nucleus controls the activities in the cell. The activities in the cell. It does not control movement of substances. So this is false. Alright, all the best to your revision for whatever exam that you are sitting for. Take care. Goodbye.